So Naomi, give us the historical line here. I mean, you've looked at all of this and the impact on science and how science has been under siege and how this plays.
Thanks. Yes. Well, one of the things that's difficult about this issue is that we all feel that the present moment is different and worse than things that have happened in the past. And yet, if we look at it historically, we see a pretty long historical story that I used to say began with the tobacco industry, but now I actually know it goes back even further. But if we at least start with the tobacco industry, we know that in the 1950s, the tobacco industry was confronted with a very strong body of scientific evidence that demonstrated beyond any reasonable doubt that their product killed people when used as intended. And the industry had a set of choices in front of it. They could have chosen to switch to producing other products. They could have chosen to diversify. But what they chose instead was to fight the facts. And they began to work with public relations companies, with advertising agencies, and then to create front organizations, AstroTurf organizations that appeared to be independent but really weren't, to fight the facts and to promote a set of arguments, some of which were counterfactual. We don't really know if tobacco is harmful. But a second set was ideological, to say that any attempt to regulate the industry will be an assault on personal freedom and take us on the slippery slope to socialism. And it's that piece that I think links to Jane's story, and to some extent to Yahya as well, that they began to realize that actually supporting the ideological argument was a very effective strategy because it would appear to be principled. Because if a tobacco industry executive said, oh, don't worry, our product's fine, most of us would realize that those executives were not objective and independent, that they had a vested financial interest. But if they said, well, we believe in freedom, we believe in liberty, we think you should be able to decide for yourself whether you want to vote, and you don't want to live in a nanny state where the government is going to tell you how to live your life. That argument would not necessarily seem self-interested, and it would resonate with the think tanks, such as the American Enterprise Institute or the Cato Institute, and therefore they could create an alliance with these other organizations. And so I see the tobacco industry as a key part of the origins of this story, which then the Koch brothers and other groups then reinforce in a variety of ways.
So Paul, it's a significant intellectual undertaking, but also an important element of just understanding the moment to see whether there is a clear narrative through this time that then brings us to this moment of crisis and peril for evidence-based, fact-based thinking.
Yeah, so there are a number of currents that I think come together, and I think certainly industry was pushing these ideas, and the Koch brothers and so forth. You do have to ask yourself, so why was there the response to it? And I think you have to take into account the long backlash that we have had against the enormous changes that have taken place in race, in gender, in particular. This is a backlash that is concentrated, let us be clear, among white men. It is especially strong among older people. It is in response to an enormous transformation in social relations that has been going on. And I think has been, in effect, an alliance of convenience between these economic interests and these concerns about identity and status. And in a period when, of course, many working class people have suffered economically from stagnant incomes and so forth, and are consequently responsive to a lot of these denunciations of a government that, from their point of view, isn't doing enough for them. So I think there's a whole context. But I want to talk about another element that's, I think, in a way complementary to what Yochai talks about with the emergence of this right-wing media ecosystem that really began even before the internet. It began with Rush Limbaugh, it began with Fox News in the 90s, and the internet has helped amplify this development. This is a crucial aspect if we're concerned with the spread of disinformation. But then on the other side, in this same period, there has been a tremendous weakening of what are often derisively referred to as the mainstream media.
We don't sit around talking about the CBS Evening News, ever.
Yeah.
I mean, and they still have millions of viewers.
Yeah.
But that conversation does not involve much of the mainstream media anymore.
Yeah, and there's been a tremendous contraction of journalism, just sheer the number of reporters. This is
And especially at the local and
especially at the local level, so that people who used to get their local paper and used to have a window on the world that was to some extent moderated by the local editors and by the Associated Press and so forth. And those gatekeepers, who are often denounced, those terrible media gatekeepers, but they did keep out some of the lies and distortions that now are transmitted readily online.